The North African sun blazed across the desert as German recovery crews moved cautiously through the wreck-strewn battlefield. Smoke still drifted from the dunes, carrying the metallic scent of burned fuel and scorched steel. Among the twisted remains of American vehicles, something unusual caught the eye of Oberleutnant Karl Weber, a tank still largely intact, its olive-green paint dulled by sand but its frame remarkably undamaged. "Ein Sherman," muttered one of the mechanics, brushing dust off the turret. It was an M4A1, captured almost pristine after its crew had abandoned it under fire. The Germans had encountered Shermans before, formidable, numerous, and annoyingly dependable, but never one they could study up close. Weber radioed the find back to command. Within days, the tank was shipped north for technical evaluation. Weeks later, under gray skies in occupied France, the Sherman rolled into a German test facility near Versailles, a place where the Wehrmacht's engineers dissected enemy vehicles piece by piece. The men there were used to machines that looked like works of art, the Panther, the Tiger, the intricate machinery of the Reichspride. By comparison, the Sherman looked crude. Rivets instead of welds, rough edges, a design that screamed mass production. "Primitive," one engineer said, tapping the armor plate with a wrench. Another smirked at the sight of its simple transmission casing. But the real test, Weber insisted, was not how it looked, it was how it ran. They fueled it up, checked the oil, and climbed inside. The air was thick with the smell of rubber and diesel. The controls, to their surprise, were almost childishly simple: large, clearly labeled levers, a clean dashboard, and roomy visibility through wide periscopes. "American," one of them joked. "Designed for farmers, not soldiers." The ignition clicked. The radial engine coughed once, twice, then roared to life without protest. The sound was steady, rhythmic, none of the temperamental sputtering they were used to from their own Maybach engines. The Sherman moved forward, smooth even over uneven ground. The testers exchanged quick glances. It wasn't fast, nor elegant, but it worked. Effortlessly, Weber ordered an endurance test. The Sherman drove hour after hour around the dusty proving ground, stopping only for fuel. No overheating, no jammed gears, no hydraulic leaks. Not once did a mechanic have to crawl under it. When they finally opened the engine bay, the men expected wear, stress fractures, maybe oil seeping from the seals. Instead, they found everything still intact. One engineer, Hauptmann Ernst Müller, a veteran of the Panzer Development Bureau, stood silently for a long moment, his gloved hand resting on the tank's engine block. "This," he said finally, almost to himself, "was built to fight a war, not a theory." In the following days, the Sherman became the center of attention at the Versailles testing ground. German engineers, mechanics, and officers gathered around it like scholars around a relic. They took measurements, sketched diagrams, and noted every component that differed from their own designs. Oberleutnant Weber watched as Müller directed the crew to remove the powertrain and inspect the drive system. "Notice the casting," Müller said, pointing to the engine block. "It's not milled by hand. This was poured, molded, shaped in seconds. They're not wasting time on perfection, they're chasing quantity." To a German engineer, that bordered on heresy. Their tanks, the Panzer IV, the Panther, the mighty Tiger, were mechanical masterpieces, assembled with precision like luxury automobiles. Each component was engineered for peak performance, and each required skilled labor to install. But with that precision came fragility. If a Tiger's transmission broke, it could take a week to repair. If its engine failed, entire units could be stranded. The Sherman, in contrast, seemed indifferent to abuse. Its tolerances were wide, forgiving. The design didn't punish a soldier for being careless or clumsy. Its parts fit together with purpose, not vanity. When they compared the data, the results were humbling. The Sherman's engine lasted nearly twice as long before requiring overhaul. Its tracks were simpler to replace. Even its suspension, the vertical volute spring system, was absurdly easy to maintain. Müller leaned over a stack of notes, muttering in disbelief. "They've sacrificed refinement for reliability," he said. "And somehow, it works." He turned to Weber. "Do you know how long it takes to build one Tiger?" Weber nodded grimly. "Nearly 300,000 man-hours." "And a Sherman?" Müller continued. "A fraction of that. And they can build 10 while we build one." It was more than an engineering revelation. It was a glimpse into the industrial soul of their enemy. America's factories, run by unending shifts of workers, were producing not just weapons, but momentum. The Sherman wasn't just a tank. It was a statement of capacity. A few days later, a visiting officer from Berlin arrived to observe the tests, Oberstleutnant Dieter Kraus from the Heereswaffenamt, the German Army Weapons Office. He had heard rumors of the captured tank's performance and wanted to see it himself. When he climbed into the driver's seat, the difference was immediate. "The controls are light," he remarked. "It responds easily." Then, with a wry grin, "If only our panzers could do the same." After a full test circuit, Krauss emerged with his tunic stained with oil and dust, but his face betrayed admiration. "This machine," he said slowly, "was not designed for prestige. It was designed for victory." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hangars, Weber stood beside the Sherman one last time before it was dismantled for full analysis. The metal still radiated warmth from the day's testing. He realized something he'd never say aloud, that in a war fought by steel and willpower, the side with the simpler machine might just outlast the one with the superior one. Inside the hangar, Muller scribbled his final report for Berlin. The American M4 Sherman demonstrates a mechanical reliability and maintainability superior to all current German designs. Though inferior in armor and firepower, its operational consistency and ease of manufacture represent a decisive industrial advantage. He paused before signing his name, staring again at the tank through the window. "We have built machines of brilliance," he whispered, "but they have built machines that endure." By early spring, fragments of the Sherman had been carefully crated and sent to various German research centers, Kassel, Kummersdorf, and even the Henschel works at Paderborn. Engineers across the Reich pored over its blueprints and broken-down components, comparing its every bolt and bearing to those of the panzers they had so painstakingly refined. In Kummersdorf, the chief of the Armored Trials Department, Dr. Wilhelm Keitel, ran a series of stress tests on the Sherman's gearbox and suspension. "Look at this," he said to his assistant, tapping the thick technical sheet with a pencil. "The tolerances are wide enough to be made by the thousands. They've removed the art, and replaced it with efficiency." His assistant frowned. "But isn't that crude?" Keitel smiled thinly. "Crude? No. Purposeful. Every unnecessary refinement is time lost, and time is what Germany no longer has." The findings spread quickly through the armored corps. Reports were compiled, summarized, and sent up the chain of command. But what could the engineers do? The German war machine was already too deep in its obsession with complexity. The Tiger II, with its 70-ton weight and 18-speed transmission, was entering production, and the bureaucracy that demanded perfection over practicality was too entrenched to change course. Still, among those who worked with their hands, the mechanics, the field engineers, the crews, admiration for the Sherman's design grew quietly. Soldiers on the Eastern Front would later write home about the trouble of maintaining their panzers in freezing mud, how they envied the Allied tanks that seemed to run no matter what conditions they faced. Meanwhile, in occupied France, the Sherman that had been so meticulously studied was now reduced to scattered parts, its hull cut open, its engine block dismantled. But the lessons it taught outlived its steel. Muller and Weber, now reassigned to the Armored Command staff, often reflected on the test. During one long night of planning, Weber unfolded a map of the Western Front. "Do you ever think," he asked quietly, "that the war will be decided not by the best machine, but by the one that keeps moving?" Muller didn't answer immediately. He stared at the map, at the vast distances, the supply lines, the sheer scale of it all. "It already has been," he said finally. As 1944 dawned, those words began to prove prophetic. Across the Channel, Allied factories ran around the clock, producing Shermans faster than they could be sunk on their way to Europe. When D-Day came, hundreds of them rolled ashore in the first waves, crude, simple, and utterly reliable. Many German tank commanders who faced them recognized the design immediately. Some had read the very reports Muller had written. But by then, it was too late. The Sherman wasn't supposed to be perfect, it was supposed to be enough. And that, more than anything, made it unbeatable. Months later, as the Allies surged through France, Muller's test facility at Versailles was overrun. The hangars lay silent, papers scattered, and among them, the surviving copy of his evaluation report. A young American officer picked it up, brushing off dust. He read the final line aloud, half smiling at the irony. "In the end," it said, "the measure of a tank is not how finely it is built, but how long it keeps fighting." He folded the paper carefully, slipped it into his pocket, and stepped outside, where another column of Shermans rumbled past, engines humming, tracks clattering, unstoppable.